Hello everybody and welcome to another Fire Emblem Top 5 list here on the channel. Today we're going to be looking at, in my opinion at least, the top 5 most fun units to use in Sacred Stones. So last time we looked at Fire Emblem 6. If you want to watch that video, I'll leave the link in the description. I have skipped Fire Emblem 7. There's no real reason for this. I love Fire Emblem 7. I just got a comment that asked if I could do it for Sacred Stones. So I decided to skip 7. We'll go back and do 7 later. But yeah, there's a ton of fun units using Sacred Stones. One of the beauties of this game is that despite when I play my Iron Mans and stuff, not using the Overworld or the Tower of Elnai or anything like that, you absolutely can, and it makes training a lot of the weaker units a lot more easy, I guess, and fluid in the game. It's not quite as frustrating as, let's say, some of the really weak units in Fire Emblem 6. So there are going to be some pretty darn weak units on this top 5 list, but I think it'll be all right. So as always, if you agree, if you don't agree, you probably won't agree, honestly, because again, this is a very subjective list. Please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, we'll get right into the video. We're gonna have just one honorable mention, and then the top 5 list. All right, so kicking off our list, I have again our only honorable mention, and that is Vanessa. So the images that I'm using here are, I believe, her Cipher artwork, which was the trading card game for Fire Emblem. I know they look a little weird, but I don't know. I decided to use them. The other ones will be sort of more normal. The characters that are in Heroes, it's a lot easier to do this with because they look, I think, more normal on my background. But no, whatever. The Cipher artwork's all great. By the way, if anybody doesn't know, there was a Fire Emblem TCG called the Cipher. It's got amazing artwork. If you ever want to check that out, feel free. But that has nothing to do with this list. The point is not number 5. The honorable mention is Vanessa. I decided to include Vanessa. I almost included her in the top 5 list because I did want to have one unit in the top 5 list that is the really dominant unit of the game. We had Milady in Fire Emblem 6. I mentioned Har before if we ever do that game. But I don't think, as much as I love Vanessa, and I don't think that Vanessa is the most dominant character in the game because Sacred Stones features arguably the best Jagged of all time, maybe one of the best units of all time, if we're being honest. So we'll talk about him when we get into the top 5 list. But Vanessa, I do think is a close second. I like her a lot, which is funny because I don't really like Pegasus Knights in 7 or 6 that much. I think they're kind of annoying to train, and they're a little weak. But Vanessa, mostly by sort of proxy of Sacred Stone just having really weak enemies, can absolutely tear through the game. She's a flyer, a lot of fun to use. I like Vanessa a ton. I would highly recommend using her and training her. So yeah, I think she's easily an honorable mention, and if the Jagged of this game didn't exist, she would be on the top 5 list, for me at least. And speaking of the best character in the game, at number 5 we have Seth. So obviously Seth is the best character in Sacred Stones, and like I said, arguably one of the best characters in all of Fire Emblem, given the context of their specific games. Seth comes as a pretty standard Jagged, I would say, not too much stronger than like Marcus from the previous game, perhaps a little bit, but Sacred Stone's enemies are just not that strong and never really get that strong, and his growths are way better than Marcus from the previous game, so he will dominate early on and dominate in the end game. I didn't really want to put him any higher than 5 because Jaggeds I don't think are ever like that fun per se because you don't really get to train them. The nice thing about Seth is you do get to see his stats go up, and that's always fun. But you don't really get to you don't get to promote him, you don't get to put effort into him, and it's sort of boring, I guess, to just see a character absolutely dominate the game. But I do think that that's fun to a certain extent, and it is kind of crazy that you get to use a character like this. I mean, genuinely, Seth is one of the best characters just ever, considering how much he can dominate this game, and I do think there's some fun in that. He is absolutely insane in this game. Alright, coming in at number 4, we have Calm, the thief of the game. And he's on this list mostly just for one reason, and one reason only, and that's because finally, in the GBA games, you have a thief that can not only promote, which you can't do in Fire Emblem 6, but can promote relatively early. So in Fire Emblem 6, you can't promote thieves at all, and in Fire Emblem 7, you can promote them, but it's really late in the game, even though you get 2 thieves. In this game, you get an Ocean Seal actually fairly early, so you can promote and use a thief. Now, he's not a particularly good character because he is sword locked, all that stuff, whatever. But he can promote into an assassin, and assassins are a really cool class. The only reason I don't have him higher is because he's not that unique. Because 2 other units can promote into assassins in this game, in Joshua and Marissa, and I almost had them share number 4 here, but I thought it'd be kind of dumb if I just had 3 units at number 4. But you can also kind of put them on here because again, they also have access to the assassin class. Mostly I just think the assassin class is really cool. And then of course you have Jafar in Fire Emblem 7, who also comes in as an assassin, and you can actually promote Legault and Matthew. But I think Culm is easily on this list because, again, you get to actually promote him early, and you get to use an assassin for like a good portion of the game. And one of the beauties of Sacred Stones, I'll probably keep saying this, is that the enemies just aren't that strong. So even though Culm is going to be a lot worse, like especially offensively, than a lot of your other units, it doesn't matter as much. You can still get a lot of use out of him. And yeah, for those of you that don't know, the assassin class gets the lethality skill, which just insta-kills your enemy. It does make it, I think, just a lot worse than the Swordmaster class, if I'm being honest. So that's another reason I didn't have Joshua and Marissa on here, even though I think the Swordmaster class is also really cool. But I think Culm is sort of unique in the Thieves of the GBA games. And you can even take that one further and be like, so then the next game can't promote either, even though Vault can. So Culm is sort of unique in that respect that you actually get to use him promoted for a lot of the game. And again, I just think the assassin class is really, really cool. So mostly Culm as an assassin is on this list at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have Noel. So Noel's on this list for a very similar reason to why Culm was on this list. But while Culm can become a really cool class, but that class is in other games, Noel can become a really cool class, and that class isn't really in any other game. In fact, there's only one other unit in this game that can actually become that class, and that is the Summoner class. So in Fire Emblem, it is basically busted anytime you get to actually summon like a unit to fight for you that can die. Because the way that permadeath works is that if a character doesn't have permadeath, if you can just use them to distract enemies or get chip damage or whatever, it's just insanely busted. You can look at, for example, Tanith in the next game in Path of Radiance, who can summon 3 Pegasus Knights twice, 1 Falcon Knight. That's really, really powerful. Noel and the Summoner class can just keep summoning over and over and over again. It's extremely unique to this game. Again, Fire Emblem does not let you do this most of the time. Now, the Phantoms that you summon all have 1 health, and they're not particularly strong. But the fact that you can just essentially, distract an enemy permanently or, again, consistently do chip damage is just so powerful. Seriously, like, I think that the Summoner class, and Noel in particular, gets sort of undervalued just because Sacred Stones isn't that difficult. Like, why would I want the utility of a Summoner class when Seth has already ripped through half the chapter before Noel can even, Noel's Phantom can even get at anyone? And I get that. But you can do some really funny stuff with Noel and his Phantom, to be fair. And I think if this class was in a more difficult game, it would be just like insanely busted. And it is insanely busted, but you'd see it being insanely busted for a lot more reasons. So I think Noel is easily on this list because, again, he's one of 2 units that can become arguably one of the most busted classes they've ever made in a Fire Emblem game, let alone this game. So it's really unique to be able to use it. I think it's a lot of fun to summon the little Phantoms over and over again. And coming in at number 2, we have Myrrh, who's the Manakete of the game. To me, Myrrh is basically Fa, but done right. She has 20 more uses of her Dragonstone. She comes a lot closer to the end of the game. She's a lot of effective damage. Fa, to be fair, also has some effective damage, but to me, Myrrh is a huge part of this game. She's almost like the Goda of the game in a way. If you train her, she absolutely destroys the end game, and I just find her really fun to use. It's also really cool to just, again, see sort of a Manakete that's actually really useful as opposed to Fa, which is much more of like a tech unit from Fire Emblem 6. Mostly Myrrh's on here because once she gets really strong, it's not that hard to train her, and once she gets really strong, oh my god, she just absolutely destroys the end game. You can have her ruining Leon or however you say his name, and the final boss, and the Manakete in the Darkling Woods, just all sorts of units she can absolutely massacre. It's just really fun, I think, to have just a completely, I don't want to say overpowered unit, but a really, really strong unit in Myrrh. And her damage against monsters with the effective damage in Sacred Stones is just enormous. Again, I find her a lot of fun to use. And because you do have those 50 uses on the Dragonstone, as opposed to the 30 from, let's say, Fa, and you have so much effective damage in the end game, it's really easy to train her and really easy to get her to that point. So, again, sort of for the same reason that Noel's on this list, I think Myrrh is a really unique unit in basically all of Fire Emblem, considering what she can do with the end game. So, I like Myrrh a lot, and I have a lot of fun using her. Alright, and coming in at number 1, fine, we have the Trainee Units. So I know earlier in this list I mentioned that I didn't want to put 3 units at number 4, and a big part of that is because I knew I was going to have 3 different units at number 1. If I was actually making this list and made these 3 individuals, they would just take up 3 slots, and I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to make this list a little bit more varied. But let's face it, the Trainee Units are number 1. They will always be number 1. And they're number one for one reason, and really one reason only, and that's because they have so many different classes they can turn into. So the way Sacred Stones works, I mentioned this earlier, is when you promote, you get to choose between two classes, but these are trainee units, which means that they get to choose between two classes of even the first promotion. So like Ross, for example, can become either a pirate or a fighter. E1 can become either a shaman or a mage. Basically, they all have three promoted classes they can go to. E1 has four because shaman and mage don't share any classes, but it just means that you have so many different possibilities with these units. Rolf can become a hero or a berserker or a warrior. Amelia can become a great knight, a general, or a paladin, and E1 can become a sage, a mage knight, a druid, or a summoner. If I was actually going to put a number one, I might do E1 just because, again, you have four different options, and he also can become a summoner. We talked about how busted summoning is in this game when we talked about Noel. He is the other one that can become the summoner class. But really, again, these units are just on here because you have so many different options. I know in the case of E1 and Amelia, they are fairly frustrating because they come so late in the game. But again, I'm not really holding that against them too much because you do have the Tower of Elnai and the map Overworld. In an Iron Man setting, these two are some of the worst units in the entire game. But I don't think that they're like not fun to use because again, they have so many different possibilities, so many different implications with them. So yeah, I think that these are easily the number one. Again, if they were going to be number 1, 2, and 3, I'd probably have E1 number 1, probably Ross number 2, and then Amelia number 3, something like along those lines. But again, I didn't want this list to be dominated by them. So yeah, they're the most fun units. I would highly recommend using all of them, really no matter what run you're doing. So yeah. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. This is the end of the list. As I said earlier, if you agree, if you disagree, feel free to comment. Next time, I think, like I said, we'll probably be looking at Fire Emblem 7, doing the same thing for that. If you do have any like specific top 5 lists you'd like to see, feel free to put that down below. I do listen to comments in that capacity. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.